Again, this is Gertner. I'm the Director of Projects and Operations at MCC Corporate College. We thank you for joining us today for our session on cross-generational communication. This is Denise Reed Lamoureux, but a couple of points of logistics. First of all, if you please mute your phones while we're doing the presentation. We'll be asking for your input either verbally or through chat during our session today. But so that you're able to hear us and we get no feedback in the background, if you could please mute your phones when the presentation is ongoing, we appreciate that. What we're seeing is our website, www.workforceforward.com. All our sessions here. And let me and our again to managing the generations in the workforce. Our webinar today brought to you by MCC Corporate College. Reed Lamoureux is our MCC Corporate College instructor. Teaching for us for several years. Her upcoming sessions include one here at MCC Corporate College, located right across the street from the Brighton campus. This is in full, Friday, October 21st. And he also leads our Become a Rockstar Presenter program. Session in October, and 2 sessions of the peer-to-boss transition, which Denise teaches for us also. One session in November, and another session in December. And you can register for all classes at www.workforceforward.com. So over to Denise.
So welcome to those of you who were able to join today. You know, this topic that I find fascinating for a lot of reasons. Because the first time in the history of the working world that there are 5 generations in one office all at the same time. So others need to know how to manage those multiple generations. And if they have the help from some of the tools and processes and models, they can certainly learn more about how to reward, how to motivate, and how to lead that generation, that multi-generational group forward into the workplace. So we've got a lot that we'll discuss. And first and foremost, using the chat feature in the room, I'm going to ask you a question after I explain a little bit about who the generations are. So veterans are the generation that's been in the workforce the longest. They are the ones responsible for ladder careers. You go to the corporate ladder, you finally got to the deluxe office in the corner and the whole bit. Who came after the veterans generation and is the largest of all generations to date, create a whole live to work mantra. In other words, their identity was caught up in what their title consisted of, and the ones who very handily created for us the 8-hour work week. Work to live, a very disparate difference between the boomers' attitude. The reason for that is they were the first to see corporate downsizing when their parents were laid off. Their attitude towards a workplace and loyalty towards a particular company is very different from the generations previous to them. Gen is experiencing more of what are called lattice careers. And that means that instead of doing that hierarchical movement up the ladder, they're taking maybe a lateral move, sometimes a move that someone would consider quote-unquote backwards, and all this is designed to increase their skill sets, increase their marketability. And we have entering into the workforce, either as first-time careers or through internship programs, the group that's being called the echo boomers. And several reasons for why they're called the echo boomers, not the least of which is the fact that they are second in size to the boom generation, and they share some of the altruistic characteristics that boomers tend to have. But the group has been given participation trophies their whole lives, and they are used to the opportunity to be rewarded for their performance. So here's my first question to you. Again, using the chat feature that's down below the list of participants, I'd like you to type in whether you're a veteran, a boomer, a member of Gen X or Y, or whether you'd be considered an echo boomer. Type in mine as well. So I'm generation. Who else has today? Obviously, since the boomer generation is the largest of all time, that there is still a good percentage of boomers in the workforce. I think the statistics are like 34%. Now, veterans are still in the workforce much longer than any other generation before them, largely due to corporate downsizing, as well as the opportunity to come back from retirement as a consultant. So we get more for boomers from Kelly, and let's go ahead and move on and learn more about how we can really bring these disparate groups together. 5 generations, 5 definitions and viewpoints on all kinds of different things, from how work gets done to how a team should be structured. But there's one of us as leaders who gets to work with these 5 generations, and we have to figure out how we communicate effectively, how we motivate and reward, and how to pull that all together and harness the benefits of those generational perspectives. And we also have to lead them through change activities. And if there's anything you know about being in the corporate world, that change is constant. So in order to lead these generations through change, you need to understand how they react to change and what they appreciate from change projects and efforts. So again, it's an opportunity for you to learn and grow as a leader and then pull together a team that is much more cohesive. So we're going to be talking about those viewpoints and perspectives. How do we understand more about what these generations look for? There are perceptions on how work gets done. Back in the days of the veterans and the boomers, things were documented. They were controlled. There were deadlines and phase gates and measurements and reviews. Now, there is an expectation for there to be something called funderstanding and edutainment. And those 2 terms that you'll hear me use a couple times during our time together today. So let me define them for you so you have an idea of what I'm talking about. Edutainment kind of is almost self-explanatory in the fact that they expect that their learning opportunities be entertaining. Don't forget the younger generations coming into the workforce have pretty much had gaming as part of their daily experiences and have done a lot of learning through gaming as they grew. Funding means that as they're learning on the job, as they're sitting in a training class, as they're mentoring others who are coming into the company, that the opportunity to learn, to experience, to grow should have some enjoyment attached to them. And that comes in through areas such as collaboration, doing job rotations, and something called reverse mentoring. Reverse mentoring has really grown out of the last 5 years or so in the corporate world, and it comes from the fact that oftentimes when a new person comes into the company, they're mentored by someone who is well established, has been with the company, for X number of years and so forth. What we find is reverse mentoring occurs quite in a germane fashion with these 2 people who have been partnered together. They can teach the more seasoned employee some of the new technological things that they've been exposed to since they've recently come out of school. And the seasoned employee will give that newbie the historical perspective of the company, as well as the information about how things progress and how things get done within the organization. The whole idea of how work gets done has changed from a very rigid and structured fashion and a much more collaborative, open, and very inclusive structure as we're starting to see in the corporate world now. 5 very distinct definitions of work-life balance. This is an important component, beginning with Gen X and going through with the Gen Ys and the Echoes. Remember, the Boomers' mantra is live to work, but the Gen X and beyond's mantra is more really live or work to live. So basically, they take the idea on that there are more important things than just being at work. With veterans and the Boomers, their identity was tied up with being in that particular role, that position, that company. So if you were to hazard a guess, all these words that are in the word cloud over to the left, if somebody was giving advice from the generation, which of the phrases do you think the Boomer would actually say to you? So if you want to type in the response below. So if a Boomer was giving you advice, would they tell you to carry a notebook, relax and rejuvenate, get enough sleep? What do you think that they would say based on what you've heard so far? Keep a notebook. Really good. You're absolutely right. Remember, the Boomers live to work. So they really are very focused, they're very time-oriented, and they really expect that you have a record of what was talked about earlier in the day. Very good. And what about Gen X? Gen X is the first generation to take a look at corporate loyalty differently than generations before them. They are a type that will be more focused on work-life balance than they are on the actual position that they hold. So what do you think a Gen X employee would give as advice? Absolutely, really good. And the relax and rejuvenate, and especially plan your life. Not just your work, but your life. And make sure your work fits into the life that you're trying to create for yourself. You guys are already becoming experts, and I'm quite excited to see the ability that you have to really start to understand some of these nuances at the very start of today's session. Ask you what the Echoes would say if they were giving advice. And the one that should stand out to you based on a little bit of what I said, but the Echoes are the newest coming into the workforce. They love to collaborate. They want to be in group settings. What would their advice to be newer than them coming in? Relax and rejuvenate. And what might they say? Perfect. They're the ones who really expect that mentoring is going to be part of their workforce life as soon as they're hired into a company. If you think about it, previous generations, like the Boomers and the veterans, you'd actually think that mentoring was a privilege that you got after time went by. But that's a very different look and feel to corporate America now, and there's an expectation that mentoring will be available immediately. And Mary's point, knowing your limits. You know, it's an interesting one, but that is a good piece of advice for Echoes to give to one another when they first come into a company. It's also an interesting fact that the Generation Y and the Echo generation will move into leadership positions a good 8 to 10 years quicker than the generations before them. And that has a lot to do with the fact that since the Boomers were the largest generation ever, and the veterans are slow to leave the workforce, when they do leave, they're going to leave altogether at once. So there's going to be a huge need for leadership over these next 10 to 15 years. And so the Gen Ys, the Gen Xers, and the Echoes will step into those leadership roles sooner than they would have had the hierarchy remained the same. So goodness, let's continue on. Part of your job is being trained to do your job. And it's important for us as leaders to understand what type of training would be appealing to those different generations. So your veterans are very traditional, and they like the face-to-face, but they really don't like doing role-playing during a class. So that's something to keep in mind if you're going to lead a group through a training session. We'll chat it up. We like to have others see how smart they are, so they're going to want group activities and opportunities to share perspective. Jen, really more on to the web-based training so they're not interrupted from the work that they're doing and do it at a time that is more convenient for them. Now, X was the first of the generations to really redefine the working day. Previous generations did, the 8 to 5, punch the clock, hour for lunch, etc. And now the generations that have come after the veterans and the boomers really want a more flexible workspace to within. So, coming in later, leaving early on Tuesdays because little Jimmy has a softball game, and all of this is really what turns their ability to function much differently than generations previous to them. And then they're the ones who want the edutainment and the understanding, and then they'll really thrive in a learning environment. So keep that in mind if you're structuring learning, whether it's formal learning or whether it's in a team meeting setting, etc. You can truly change the trajectory of what you take away from that session by making it more tailored to different preferences. Very interesting to note that now in 2016, there are certain specific skills that we really all have as part of our repertoire, and they include things like negotiation and creativity, etc. But if we're going to scale our workforce forward, we need to be looking at what 2020 is going to need from our workforce as well. And you'll see there's a couple new ones that are coming onto that list. And especially in the space of paying attention to service orientation. So much of the jobs that are available today are in a service capacity. So if we know that our particular teams really use some more training in those skill set areas, it's something that we can do to bring the generations together more quickly by offering them training to get them on common ground as well. It's also as leaders to understand the core competencies that the different generations bring with them naturally and be able to adjust to that, make adjustments to that, ensure that our people have training to be able to skill up in these areas. Document is all about understanding not only the history of what's been happening in the workplace, but also how the different tools interact, etc. Cross-cultural communication skills have really become very important in the last 5 years or so because we have become so much more of a global marketplace. Delegation is a skill set that is really acquired over time. Because when you first enter into a workplace, not, be confident in your ability to delegate to others. You're still trying to figure out the hierarchy, etc. But effective delegation is a must-have leader's toolkit, and it's something that leader needs to be teaching their employees as they move along their career trajectory. So who really has these competencies at the core? So if you take a look at the 5 that I chose, business acumen, risk-taking, cross-cultural communication skills, time management, and strategic analysis, you already know about the generations. You had to say which of the generations had business acumen as their core competencies. What generation would that be? So I think your answer is, and I'm not going to be critical of any answers that may not be right on, but oh, look at that. Right off the bat, Kim gets it right. The veterans really are the ones who have the highest degree of business acumen. They can do their history stories as well as the future state. And just one other from this list, and who would really have from the generations the best developed cross-cultural communication skills, based on the experiences that they bring to the workplace. We have the best cross-cultural communication skills. You're Anyone here close to Mary? You're getting closer. It's echoes. And the reason for that is that their entire educational experience has more of a mosaic than any of the other generations prior to. So time management goes to the boomers, and I'll go ahead and show you very quickly how that plays out. But a very quick look at the competencies they bring into the workforce with them. So if you see that you've got somebody who's lacking in a particular skill set, you can certainly pair them with somebody from one of the other generations to have them increase their competency. Each of the generations also has a very distinct expectation of management, who help lead the effort and are very happy to mentor. And why? Want autonomy and access to good tools and very clear deadlines. Let's really get into the titles. Gen and Y want opportunities to learn more and gain additional skills. And Boomers, like I said, want that mentoring opportunity as soon as they arrive. Veterans want schedules and roles and responsibility documents. And Boomers really want the timelines and those roles and responsibility documents as well as opportunities to pair as teams. Really quickly, from this section right here, what's been your biggest revelation? What's something that you learned here that you didn't know before? If you quickly type that into the chat window, that would be great, because I'd like to see what your perceptions are of what stood out for you so far. What at this point? The whole idea of leadership positions coming into the workplace much more quickly, it's very interesting, and we have to ensure that we've done good succession progression planning and that skills are really outlined for positions so that people are ready to step into those roles. So very, thanks for that. So a little bit more about what we can put into our toolkit to be successful in leading these multi-generational teams. The model called Choose Your Focus. This comes to us from David Rock. And David is a renowned coach, and he has also written a really great book that if you're ever looking for a book on leadership to take a look at, it's called Quiet Leadership. And I spelled it quite, so sorry about that. But this model is one that I really find to be very helpful to me. If you're trying to get the boomer attention, share the vision of what you're planning to accomplish. If you want veterans to really play a part in your efforts, be part of the planning of what's going to happen. X will give you a lot of details in your group discussions because they are the best read generation and can speak to you from multiple sources with stats and figures and information that you would not know even existed because you haven't read as extensively as they have. Gen are your problem solvers. Echoes, you need to keep them involved at every stage of the project so they don't feel left out and start to create sort of a hierarchical, dramatic swirl around them. So Choose Your Focus model is one when you're thinking about what you need to communicate and when. Here's some of the steps you can take to ensure that your efforts are full and that things move forward very easily. Model, which is called Power. When you're going to communicate to your team, you need to first prepare your message. You need to organize the sequencing, all of that. You need to work it, in other words, practice it, see how it sounds, do some evaluation on it, and maybe rethink how you're going to approach that communication. When you use a very simple model, it really clears up what you're going to say and distills it down to the details that you need to share to really produce results. Communicate with strength. One of the problems is that we have been taught societally to be polite, and in so doing, we kind of in the power of what we're communicating by inserting nice words such as, I think this will solve our problem. Look on the right-hand side and see the difference in the statement that is really saying pretty much the same thing. It's removing the tentative and being decisive by saying, here's the solution to the problem. When you're reading across the generations, this is what they expect to hear, is decisive communications that show the authority, that show the willingness to move forward with the solution, and really ensures that the message is sent at the right time. So really think hard about communicating with strength. This is an area that I have paid a special attention to over this year or so when I'm talking in meetings, when I'm dealing with my teams, and so forth. And removing those tentative statements has made a big difference in the way people act and react when I'm speaking. So consider that, and it's really something that you'll notice a difference in right away. Is also extremely important. Not only want to see someone who's poised, polished, we want to see someone who is acting like themselves and a truly engaging leader who's offering clear and credible information at the right time. Who's trustworthy too. When you say what you do what you say. And if for some reason you cannot, you make sure you communicate that so that it's very clear that you accept situations where there may be a struggle. If people are having a struggle themselves, they're not going to be afraid to come to you and say they're experiencing issues. So being a trustworthy leader is an extremely important part of being an effective cross-generational leader. Favor you can do for the generations is to provide what's called a RACI chart. RACI, of course, is another one of the world's business acronyms, and it stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. And basically, you can create your own chart, and you would put down that, Jim is responsible for this, and we'll be accountable to ensure that the funds are there at the right time. We'll consult Terry to ensure that he's aware and has information for his time. And we'll inform the leadership to be able to let them know what's happening. So RACI can be very helpful in not only setting the stage for effective communications, but also ensuring that everyone knows who's playing what role so they can reach out to one another. Now, how about the D word, delegation, a few minutes ago? But it's really hard to delegate. Either you're not confident enough in your own skill set to be able to delegate, or you tend to be a little overprotective of what it is that you're delegating to your teams. But generation wants responsibility. And we need to remember that so that we can give people tasks. Self-responsible for core items to complete, and you entrust your team to do the rest. So in ways we can really do this effectively across the generations. The to-do list. So notice you've already drawn up the list and let your employees choose their assignment. You're really surprised at how this will sort of fall out. Now, this is sort of a risk, and you be comfortable with risk because, after all, you are giving them the opportunity to really tell you how this is going to play out. Excuse my kind of kindergartenish scrawl there, but I want you to really remember that this is risky, and this is a way for you to let them see that you are willing to trust them with these assignments. What you want to do, make sure you're doing when you're doing this type of activity is celebrate the completions as a team. This will fit into the ego of the more competitive boomers. It will give the echoes a pat on the back, and it's almost like a participation trophy that they would receive. Veterans feel the respect that is given when recognition is made in front of their organization. And Gen X and Gen Y will actually attend meetings where awards being given or accolades being mentioned because that they consider is worth it because they are good team players. Let's talk about what to delegate to which generation. And this one I've already laid out for you as an example. So if you've got a new employee, give them to the boomers. They're really very helpful, They're very altruistic. Sometimes they're called the Peace Corps generation, and they really want to help that person acclimate. Even though they're very competitive, they're also very kind. Wanted to research new tool sets. Which generation do you think we would give that task to? So go ahead into the chat room if you have a guess as to who we would assign the task of researching new tool sets. Good job, Kim. It is Gen X. And the reason for that, remember, they're the best read of the generation. So we really want to be able to give them the opportunity. Now, I'm going to go through just one more for the sake of time. But if we wanted to assign leading a change project to the generation, who would we assign that to? Very good. You're catching on quick. Definitely we would assign it to the Echoes because it would give them a chance to sort of get a leadership role and move that change trajectory forward a little more quickly since they have the latest technologies that they've been exposed to at school and can really help with some of that, laying the foundation for the new world order. So now a mission that recognizes those generational preferences. We talked about the fact that boomers really love public announcements. They love frame awards, and they also like tangible rewards, be it some kind of gift card or a monetary award or some trophy that's going to sit on their desk. Like the boomers, they really like those participation trophies. And definitely go back to that slide for you if you'd like to look at it again. So Gen X and Gen Y's perspective would prefer an additional day off as a recognition. Money is not as important to them as the quality of their life. And so extra day off will give them time to run errands, to spend the time with their families, etc. They're also very keen to have opportunities to attend seminars and training classes and so forth, and will really feel that that's a huge recognition when given the chance to go to things like that. So for men, what a takeaway? What have you learned that's a little bit different that you'll try to incorporate into what you're doing, whether the RACI chart, whether it be the Choose Your Focus model? What out for you is important in this section? Very good. Removing the tentative language. What makes such a big difference, Mary? And I'll tell you, I mentioned that I put a huge focus on this for myself, and it has made a difference in the way I'm perceived when I'm speaking in groups. Anyone other takeaway? For the sake of time, and Mary, I promise I'll go back to the slide so that you get the chance to look at it. Change management and the generation. Remember, leader, you're going to be leading your people through change a lot. And the very fact that change needs to be managed is something that is often overlooked in the corporate culture of just let's get this done, let's get it implemented, and so forth. If you pay attention to this, you can really lead your generations through change and have it be successful right from the start to the very finish. So for change is very important. You'll see there's basically 5 key things that you need to pay attention to have effective change. And that's sharing the vision, make sure people have the right skills, that there are incentives along the way, and there is a chance for the resources to come together, and that there's a very clearly defined action plan that's sharing at every single step. So your veterans and boomers want those details. Your job has sticking points that need to be addressed before they'll embrace change. And they need to know something called the WISPM, the what's in it for me, as soon as a change effort is announced. So that any communications you give to your groups, regardless of the generational hierarchy, really include how this process really change the way that people adapt to this new world order. All Gen X or Gen Y and Echoes see through filters. They need to understand what the impact is and what opportunities will be that will come out of this change. So if you have a change effort that doesn't really define the vision, you end up with a lot of confusion on the part of your people. If you have a change effort that doesn't really take into consideration the skills that people have currently and the skills that they're going to need in the future and plan for that, you're going to have a lot of anxious people. If a change in place that doesn't really have incentives for what's going to be for them, what opportunities there will be, they're going to have resistance to the change. If you have a change that doesn't really talk about how resources should look and act and feel in the world order, they're going to be frustrated because they aren't going to understand what's to be expected of them. And last but not least, if you share the action plan with them at every single step, then you have people who start doing things before they're supposed to, and as a result, really give up the overall change as it's supposed to be implemented. Attention to what each of the generations want. They want details. They want with them. They want to know the impact. They want opportunities. And they really need to understand the responsibilities and the roles for change. You do this and you follow this 5-step formula, every time you've got a change effort in place, all of your generations will feel comfortable. And your overall change effort will be more high impact and successful. Focus of change. Vision of the boomers and echoes, they want to really talk about the vision of what they're going to look like. Now, to the whole idea of really paying attention to what they need. You want veterans involved in the planning. Your Gen X, because they're so well read, will give you those details. Gen, they're your break fix people. If you want to test out things, have a quote unquote sandbox, they're the people for that role. And staying out of the drama will make sure that all of your different generations are kept informed so that there isn't a chance for them to be, oh, woe is me, I don't want this change, and so forth. Another thing that you can use for the change effort is the RACI chart. Remember, we talked about how boomers, echoes, and veterans really like a RACI. And another thing besides the RACI is another document I'll introduce you to now, and it's called the Ishikawa process. For the Ishikawa process, just type yes into the chat window. But this is what they call the fishbone diagram, which is the foundation of the Ishikawa process. And really it's for problem solving. So the head of the fish is a problem statement, like perhaps it might be something to the fact that training was not effective. Well, the problem statement. So now you are going to fill in the bones of this problem statement with the reasons why training was not effective. Perhaps it didn't address all of the department's needs. It was too short. It might have occurred too far ahead of the actual activity. So while your bones in place on this little rudimentary fish, now it's time to say, okay, bone number 1 is going to belong to so-and-so. Here's the date that they're going to have to get it started, and here's when we expect them to be finished. Here's the steps they're going to take, and here are the risks that will happen if we don't have this in place to resolve and fix. So Gen X and Gen Y really like the simplicity of this document, but what really is a great benefit for all generations is now everything is very clearly defined who needs to do what, by when, and what steps are going to take to get there. So, leader, you couldn't ask for an easier document to execute to. And the same with a RACI. It very clearly lays out the roles and responsibilities, and then nobody can say 5 weeks from now, oh, I never knew that. Use the RACI chart, right? That was discussed in our team meeting. That's the information we shared at that time about who was in charge of what. So, in helping to lead a team through change, consider using these 2 types of documents to really keep them grounded and informed. So, change cohorts. dealt with the most change of any generation. Boomers love to be in the middle of change. Gen X will circle around the change to make sure everyone gets it. Break the change and then fix it and make it better. Echoes will build cohorts to communicate the change and get everyone ready. Very powerful ways by which you can use your generation to help change communication. That's with whom. Workforce situation, to really get the job done and get through change effectively, pair those and veterans for reverse mentoring, get those and Xers together to get project plans going. Your Echoes will help with a technological changeover. Boomers and Gen Y will really create a terrific program to onboard new people to this new world order. And Boomers and Echoes will develop succession and progression plans that will really ensure that that change they're making in the environment works to everyone's advantage. I'll here now and ask you if you have any additional takeaways you'd like to see from, or excuse me, you've identified during this section. And if you learned that you'll try to use moving forward. Kim, what's your question? And if you want to come off of mute and ask it aloud, feel free. Probably easier. Yes, that's a really good question. Do you see other generations exhibiting characteristics from any of the other generations? Absolutely. If a person is born sort of on the cusp of one generation to next, you'll see that some of the characteristics of both generations. Also, too, the Echo Boomers are called the Echo Boomers not only because they're second in size to the Boomer generation, but because they share some of the same characteristics of being very team-centric, of wanting to function as a group to go towards success. Your Gens and your Gen Ys have a lot of comparisons, too, because they're oriented. They want to understand and know what's happening when and who's responsible for it so they can move forward. Now, Gen Ys want to do it kind of off on the side on their own, but the veterans really want to be able to see and hear and understand each step in the process. So really question, because you will see some of the characteristics across the generations and really give you pause and make you realize that if you're taking more of this into effect, you'll be able to communicate more effectively. So good question. Thank you for that. Your is enlightening because you really have to get everyone on the same page. You know, all generations working together really, and we'll talk about this in a couple of slides, is a huge benefit for a corporation. But you have to understand how to reach them, to teach them in the first place, and understanding how to communicate to them more effectively will sort of go a long way toward helping you. Some of the tools that we've seen, the Choose Your Focus, the RACI, the Chikawa process, they will really get people on the same page. Bringing it all back together, ensuring that we've got that common understanding and can go forward out of this virtual room today and put some of these ideas into practice to make sure that we get buy-in from our teams as we're leading these multi-generational groups. We talked about there's 5 generations and 5 sets of expectations. We want to understand how to perceive the way work gets done, how they want teams to look and feel, how they should be communicated to, what motivates them to perform, and also to the structure change, create a team that really works together well, and appreciating those benefits of being in a multi-generational situation. Tune out the generational noise. We have to pay attention to this. We make sure that they do work together effectively, because this is our workforce. it's not going to change. We will not go back to having only, people who are in their 30s in an office. It will never happen that way again. People staying at work longer, they're coming to the workforce as interns more than in previous decades, and we have this generational mix moving forward. Through its own lens. You can't, grown-up glasses on a little person, and of course I'm being a little bit facetious here, but we understand what that lens is. It's more a lens that deals with understanding, more lens that deals with, deadlines and information and knowledge to move forward with, etc. There are, advantages to having a multi-generational group. You have a huge range of experience. You've got a lot of tolerance to opposing viewpoints, diversity. They are more open and welcoming to newcomers. And there's an interesting statistic in this space. Perrin, which is an HR research firm, did a study about acclimating into the workforce. And said specifically that if a person doesn't find within the first 6 months of employment some generational touch point with coworkers, then they are much more likely to leave that company before they've been there for a year. So a multi-generational team will help cut down on some of that. They're also able to mobilize quickly because they have such a depth and breadth of experiences. And they've got that technical information on their belts, but they also have the history lessons from those who have been in the workforce for a longer period of time. Gen X also promotes something called co-opetition. Definition, co-opetition is collaborating but compete at the same time. And you really want to foster that in the workplace anyways. So a multi-generational group gives an opportunity for co-opetition to really happen germanely. So veterans have an innate need to succeed. So they're really going to jump opportunities where there will be accolades possible and so forth. Accolades thrive when they're collaborating. Gen will share what they've learned, and Gen Y are terrific partners. Boomers are very competitive, but they're also extremely helpful. So when you understand this and can harness the engine of co-opetition, what you're going to end up with is a team that plays well together and plays for success. And that's a huge benefit to you as a leader. So age the generations is important. Which ones need help with their careers? Which ones need to know how they contribute? Which ones want to control the flow of work? Which ones really want to build credibility within their team? And by knowing all of this information, you're able to really pull together a solid engagement plan. There are generations in the workforce, and really just the one leader, but that combination can really spell success if you pay attention to and if you take advantage of the very huge opportunities to have this team pull together this presentation to whatever group and make it a successful endeavor from start to finish. So, last question I have for you. I'd like you to quickly put out in the chat window 3 things you learned the leader can do to lead these 5 generations. And they can just real quick, they don't have to be, War and Peace version. You can just give us a couple words about what you learned that a leader can do. So she hadn't considered the generation gap. The question as well, will you be able to get copies of these slides? And I'll let you answer that question if you don't mind, since you're with the corporate college entity.
Yeah, thank you. The slides will not be distributed. We certainly encourage you to come to our sessions and see Denise present this program live. We do have handouts in those sessions that do incorporate the slide presentations, but these will not be distributed.
And like Mary's comment about mentoring, reverse or regular, its importance to every generation. Very true. It's not an opportunity for the newbie to learn, but it's also an opportunity for the seasoned individual to gain some new clarity and understanding of what's there in the marketplace that they haven't been exposed to since they've been in the workforce for such a long period of time. What can a leader do to lead generations more effectively? Besides involved in mentoring, what else can they do? I think the skill sets a leader needs to have is a very effective delegation. Can't do everything. And can use delegation to elevate the skill sets of your teams. So delegate to elevate the skills of the people that you have. And that can be an extremely powerful exercise. Also use delegation to allow people to choose their own assignments. You're harnessing their enthusiasm and you're giving them a chance to really shine. Mary's got a good comment that if you take advantage of what every generation's experiences consist of, you really will have a better rounded team. I like what Kelly has to say about engaging everyone, not just your own comfort zone. And boy, is this true. You know, we have a tendency to think in our own fashion without thinking about how others think. And in so doing, we're missing an opportunity to truly have success. So, everyone, for your time today. The lunch hour is a very valuable piece of time, and that you really have to give up some of your own freedom and so forth to attend a virtual session. Thank you for being so engaged. I really appreciated seeing all your answers and your questions and so forth. I get the list of the classes, especially this cross-generational communication class, and the next date that it's being offered. At the website for registration there too. I'll turn it over to Jim for closure, and once more, I'll thank you all for being here.
Thanks for joining us today. If you have a comment or two before we close out, we've got a couple of minutes before 1 o'clock. Please give us some feedback on both Denise's session and your ability to access our Training Tuesdays webinar sessions, which we plan to do every month. The next one will be scheduled for Tuesday, November 1st. Bob Whipple, who is the Trust Ambassador, will be doing an hour-long webinar on trust in leadership. So that's for the November 1st session. Again, we hope to see all of you in classes at MCC Corporate College. Denise has these running this fall. Our website, www.workforceforward.com, has a full list of our schedules for programs that we offer here at MCC Corporate College. And we will come into your workforce and provide customized training for your teams, whether it be cross-generational communication or any other skills or behaviors that you would like to bring into your team. Give us a call, and we hope to see you next month. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon.